Paul Dedman. Anthony Black.
Here.
Kenny Dennis.
Present.
Brian Doherty. John Joyce. Don Kasperite. Richie Splitt. Terry Taylor. David Yost. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting on May the 2nd. The minutes were in your packet. If anyone have any comments or questions, otherwise we entertain a motion for approval.
I move approval.
Moved by Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Yost. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion approved. Item 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item 4, consent docket. None. Item 5, continuance requests. There are none. Item 6, cases for individual consideration. Item SRCA-13-00002 at 1401 Southwestern Avenue.
Aubrey?
This is the project that you've seen come before you before for rezoning of the downtown air park to allow an entertainment venue. You gave a recommendation for that rezoning to the Planning Commission. Since that time, the applicant had modified the planned unit development and presented to the Planning Commission, was approved, was sent to the City Council, and was recently approved. Now the project is back to you all to issue the CA on the actual construction of the stage and the fencing and the signage.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the applicant here? Good morning.
Mr. Chairman. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates on behalf of the applicant. Not much to add to what Aubrey said. We have tweaked the documentation to match staff recommendations, clarified some wording about signage. Since we last were here, there was quite a few things that went on. We did meet with the police department with regard to creating a system to work with the helipad location, and we added that language to the PUD document. And the police department was satisfied with that. We pretty much created a boundary line for them so that they can take off north and south clearly. And then we also agreed to have somebody on the ground on the same radio frequency as they are. So they can, our off-duty police officers that will be working the venues can coordinate with them. And the only other thing I would add is that this is really a temporary situation. The PUD itself has a sunset clause. After 3 years, it goes away. It goes back to its original zoning unless we come back and rezone it prior to the end of the 3 years for what may be the final product on the airport property. So this is truly a temporary situation to allow for an entertainment venue in this location for the next up to 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions? Scotty, do you have anything from the staff to add?
No, we recommend approval based on the changes that they made to comply with our request for the original PUD document.
Okay. Anyone else here to say anything? Doesn't look like it. We'd entertain a motion.
I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Blatt.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Dennis. All those in favor? Aye. Motion approved. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Item 7A, bylaws. Scotty?
This is just to review and comment on some of our proposed amendments. We're reviewing all the bylaws for all the design districts this year. Some of the items that we found clarify some of the articles. Others are new, basically for consistency. One of the highlights is that it limits the term of each consecutive term. That's already in the bylaws now, but rather than having to allow for a rotation off for at least one full year, it now asks for one full 3-year term because that's more consistent with the rest of the design districts. Everything else is just mostly clarification, just modifying some of the language to make it clearer and more consistent with other design districts. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Should it not, should it not have something in here relating to staggered terms in view of the fact that, as we were saying earlier on, we're going to have a fair number on this board or on this committee go off at the same time, and all things being equal, if all those people serve their terms, they're all going to go off at the same time again. I know you're going to have a couple, but...
Ideally, that would have been done at the onset when this committee was created. Now, because we have had some attrition, some people that are substituting for people who were on there originally, we will not have the full board have to rotate off at the same time. So it's kind of worked itself out by accident, but it would be nice if we had set it up that way to begin with. I don't know that we need to take steps now to make sure that we still have some of the original members that are sitting now, because I think that's going to take place naturally.
Okay. Well, who do we lose? Myself, Tony, Brian. Did you, David, did you come on initially? Were you on from the beginning? Yes. So that's David as well.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, Richie Split was on from the beginning. So that's 5 out of the... That's quite a lot.
5 out of 9, 7.
Any thoughts, anyone?
The only question that I had was with respect to you bumped up, or it was bumped up from 5 members shall to 7 members should be persons who are basically in the field. Does that ever run the risk of having 0, since it's a should? There is no requirement now for any, it's a recommendation, but there's no requirement for anyone to be a professional or in the field. How does that process work to where you don't end up in a situation where it's 0?
Right.
Just because of those who were available or willing to serve?
Because the intent is to represent the different districts, sub-districts. It may not be possible to get people who are in that design field that can represent a particular district. They don't have to live there. They just have to represent those districts. We can go back and add more language, more restrictive language if you would like.
Just a curiosity, with now there is no requirement. There's no shall anymore, and I was just curious if that was the intent.
Maybe it's because you can't get that requisite number of people from the architectural field or landscaping or whatever to fill those positions. And if you can't do that, then you can have someone who is not. The way it was written, they had to be from that. Yeah.
The first was probably too restrictive, and the second is definitely more flexible.
And we still look to see, to try to get people that are knowledgeable in the fields that would apply to this design district. So we still have some discretion at our recommendations to the mayor for appointments.
Do you have any other comments on the changes?
Some of these will need to require an ordinance amendment. Some of them are not are in conflict with the ordinance, or would be in conflict if we adopted these prior to amending our ordinance. So when we do our normal yearly update of the ordinance, we'll address these first before we bring them back to you for approval.
So right now, this is just informative.
Right.
Did you want us to come back, say at the next meeting, with any further, once everyone's had a
Yes, that would
chance to
be
look at them
helpful.
further?
If you think of something else that you think needs to be added, or something that you're concerned is not addressed adequately, yes, do.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
I might just mention something, too, about conflicts of interest and recusals. We've been meeting with each one of our design review bodies about what happens when you might have more than one member need to abstain from a vote because they feel they have a conflict of interest on that vote. Sometimes it gets down to where you have just at a quorum. If anybody recuses or abstains from that vote, then you no longer have a quorum and you can't vote on the item. So we'd had some questions about how to deal with this as far as people removing themselves from the room when they abstain and no longer maintaining a quorum, and that is the case. We wanted to clarify that situation. And in the Robert's Rules of Order, it's called that they abstain instead of recuse. So we're going to be using that word abstain from now on. When you do abstain, you do have to leave the room. And that was another question about could you just remove yourself from the horseshoe and go sit in the audience? And we would like you to leave the room. So Rita, do you want to add anything to that?
No, other than, of course, if any of you were the applicants, you would go ahead and go down front and present. But we did discuss this in our division so that we were all uniform, all of the design bodies, but we could.
So if you just have 5 people, like today, we just have a quorum, and if something comes up where someone feels they need to be out, so
They're out.
So what happens to the quorum?
You lose your quorum, and you can't take action without a quorum.
Right, absolutely.
So the matter would have to be passed for the next.
That's interesting, because if you had, say, these 3 gentlemen here involved in a situation and we had a full board and they couldn't vote on anything because of the conflict, then you'd never be able to do anything on that item, would you?
Well, you would if you got, if the rest of your body was present, because you have enough without their 3 votes to have 5 who could vote on it.
And this new bylaw now allows the committee to require an affirmative vote by the majority of the votes cast, does not require a quorum for that.
Okay.
That was, if we had all the members present, but so much of them could not vote, then you have...
Well, if they could not vote, then they would abstain and they would be out. They wouldn't be
Right.
counted for purposes of the quorum. But if they were present, then of course it would be not 5 to carry, but a majority deciding.
Okay, thank you. So should we have this on the agenda at the next meeting, just in case someone wants to make comments, or can they just do that anyway?
We can do that. We may want to wait until August or
Okay.
September because of the summer months. You know, we are going to have a meeting in July, but that we may have trouble getting a quorum together. So that everybody has the opportunity to hear what other members are suggesting or proposing, we might want to delay it a couple of months just to make sure we have a larger amount of members present.
Okay, that sounds appropriate.
One other modification that we're going to suggest making for all of the design review commissions and committees on the agenda is right now we have a section called communications, and under communications it could be communications from staff to the committee or from the committee to staff or just general comments. When we capture those types of communications, sometimes it's difficult to distinguish who the communication is about or for. So we were going to break that up on the agenda and say communications from committee, communications from staff. So in the future, if we ever do have discussion about minutes or, not minutes, but bylaws or something like that, any of that discussion can be captured on the agenda underneath that communications item. So
Okay.
we don't have to, for example, we wouldn't have to bring the bylaws back as an agenda item if just under the communications you wanted to bring up a point or a comment that you had made until the bylaws come back for an actual vote.
Okay, sounds good. Speaking of communications, item 8A, Administrative Approval Report. We have 3 items. Number 1 is SRCA-13-00011 at 210 South Ellison Avenue. Item 2 is SRCA-13-00012 at 4333 Southwest 15th Street. Item 3 is SRCA-13-00013 at 1103 South Byers, 1026 South Portland, 312 South Pennsylvania, 702 South Pennsylvania, 1429 South Portland, 1703 South Shields, and 1303 South Central Avenue. Does anyone have any comments on any of those items? If not, you'll see that the next meeting date is Friday, July the 5th, which is the day after the 4th of July. And I suspect there are going to be some people going to be gone for long weekends at that time, so that may be a problem with the quorum. Anyone have any comments? Jeannie, are you here just because you want to be here, or do you have something you...
No, I was just here to make a report to my boss about what's going on in Sea River.
Okay, well, it's always good to see you. Good to have you here. Otherwise, if there's nothing else, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Blatt, Mr. Yost, all those in favour? All right. Thank you, everyone, very much.